Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host, Brian West, here to give you your top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it throughout the week. And these top 8 stories are only documented for records and to highlight topics for those in the business of talk radio, talk media, and for those who just want to stay informed. Now let's get to the top 8 stories that made it into The Mediator this week. Story number 1, ladies and gents. Why Syria and why now? And what's going on and what you may need to know. To understand why Syria is in the state it is in, I recommend you search its current history and its position on the Middle Eastern map. This is important. It's also important to note that Russia, which has been operating as an independent ally to Assad, along with other majority Shia governments like Iran, Iraq, and Lebanon, and the Sunni majority countries which are the opposition, including Turkey, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, support anti-Assad rebels. Now we ask ourselves, what does the United States have to do with this? The United States, like everything else that goes on in the Middle East, seems to be policing the region as usual. It's also important to note that just last year, around this same time, similar strategic air attacks were made on Syria. The Syrian land is being controlled in 6 regions. Region number 1 is controlled by the Syrian government. ISIL only has a small foot in the fight, while the Kurdish forces hold the north, and it seems they are not happy with President Trump and the United States because of some decisions Trump's made and his plans to leave the region. So there's some things going on in Syria that may need our attention, a lot of attention. There's a lot going on over there. The rest of the regions are occupied by rebels and other conflicting forces. It's clear that other opposing nations see opportunity in Syria, especially Iran. According to most analysts, the only way for this war to settle is if the United States can reach an agreement with Russia and the Turkey. President Trump plays a huge part in the future of this conflict that has lasted longer than World War II. It's clear that this developing story will shoot to the top pretty soon if this goes on, because key players in the conflict see a way to get what they can from opposing nations, especially the United States. So I advise you to keep an eye on this story. Story number 2, does Facebook need to be regulated? On a quest to understand a company that has closely over 80% of the world's data, we have to ask ourselves, why is Facebook so important now? And what does Mark Zuckerberg have to do with this big emerging problem of data being released? Another question you may want to ask yourself is, how do you get off the radar if your data has already been found? Now, every intellect who has been on Facebook can tell you that there are some things on there that may pull you in the wrong direction, but this didn't happen overnight. The content on Facebook is hard to regulate and it's hard to keep track of because people have the freedom to post what they choose, and only so many eyes can catch it. So Mark Zuckerberg may have his hands full trying to find a way to keep Facebook out of the hands of the government, but it may be too late. The key in this developing story is how big of a role Mark Zuckerberg will play in the future of a company, the company that he founded. It's also important to note that if the government chooses to regulate Facebook, as it probably will, the future of the internet will take a huge U-turn in what people are used to and what people are used to doing, having the freedom to post whatever they feel and whatever they like, with only having to face the consequences of the companies who are involved. Story number 3, keep an eye on recession talks. With money comes spending, and with spending comes loss of money, and loss of money equals debt sometimes. When you see Paul Ryan, who vowed to keep a grasp on the country's debt woes, and many other Republicans jumping off or being booted off of the Washington ship or bandwagon, That's usually not a good sign for Americans and where America is headed. Then there's the fact that in a few years we could be facing more spending problems, if not sooner. Then we have the word but, like, but can we create more ways to make money without dipping into the Federal Reserves? So can the government create ways to make money? Can the country find a way to pay what we owe to our own government, to control spending, to balance things out without going into the Federal Reserves and possibly having an impact on interest rates? As long as the government keeps having budget issues, there will be a big problem when it comes to the country's financial condition, because the world is watching. Everyone is watching. And everyone is playing the game. This story has potential to grow, but all eyes will be on Trump's agenda, which seems to be very old school. Very old school. He ran off the promise to create jobs while keeping America first, and he has been making some single-player moves with old-school tactics. So now we just have to wait and see who is bluffing and who has the good hand at the card table, if everybody else is playing, and who's all participating. As this story reaches the climax, let's hope the president isn't gambling with taxpayer money, because if he is, and the future may not be looking so certain. The moral of the story is let's hope he has a plan. Story number 4. What West Virginia may reveal about President Trump's agenda. Coal was hit hard by the Democrats under the Obama administration, under Obama's watch, and it may be evident that that is where the president is headed to strengthen an industry that packs a punch on the energy grid. In observing the president's game plan, it's evident that he does have a plan, maybe, but what his motivation is for the future of America is what has some people scratching their head. And if China is stocking up on solar power, the question is, why is the U.S. now thinking old school? It's probably because of the president. Whatever is going on in Washington, we may be far away from the common voter's interest, or what common people know and don't know about their government. So it may be wise to just follow the money. And where the money goes, you may find current U.S. officials who back the president's agenda. This developing story may not be important now, but it may reveal some strategic patterns of behavior by the current administration as investigations continue into what's actually going on in Washington. Story number 5. Attention on America's workforce. There have been numerous headlines surfacing about teachers and unions, if you haven't been paying attention. And when stories like these emerge, that means that there is a glitch in the Matrix. If you've ever seen the movie, the Matrix is the working class in this situation. And when there's a glitch, that means something is changing or something has changed. As midterms approach, the working class may determine once again who wins at the ballot box. And I promise you that taxpayer levies and tax increases are going to grab the attention of those with their foot in the game. That means voters, informed voters. This story will be gaining some steam because each party needs the working class to steal the election. And with the president's approval rating slipping around the 40% range, especially around midterms, he, like every other elected official, will be trying to find a way to please the working man to keep their job. We'll see. Story number 6. What teachers feel about technology and learning. Technology in the classroom. YouTube and collecting child data made headlines. Then YouTube said it tells children to use the YouTube app, not regular YouTube. And then after that came the article about how teachers feel about children using technology to learn. The majority of teachers seem to oppose technology in classrooms because they seem to see it as a distraction. But if this story gains any ground, you may see a fight to put parents in the hot seat. So what I'm saying in this situation is that people are blaming technology And some people are blaming parents for the lack of oversight on their children. Parent oversight. After reading this story, there were some interesting comparisons made when it came to foreign students and normal American born citizens. The data may shock you into who seems to be more motivated to learn when it comes to getting an education. It will be interesting to see how long this story remains in the media. It all depends on the progress of the learning environment in America and what teachers report on that's going on in the classroom. Story number 7, and the final 2 stories that made it into the media this week. Is there some benefits to collecting your data? Although this story set in the background for a while, there is a reason why it got bumped up to number 7. And I'll tell you why. The reason has to do with the pros of collecting data and how data plays a huge role in not only progress but miracles. How's that? Now, if you watch sports, you may understand where I'm going with this, or you may not. This can depend on how much data you've collected on me or how much you know about me. And that's basically what data is. So I could throw you off course if I do something different or change my data patterns. That's how this game is working out, and that's how this game is being played. The more companies know about you, the more they can get you what you need at a better deal than what you're used to. The miracle and argument is not that collecting data is bad, but it's using it for the betterment of mankind that's good. Pros and cons. I do want you to note that almost every profession uses data to improve its operations every year, every day, collecting data on the workers and everybody else around them, the consumers. That is why this story made it to number 7, because every computer is based off of data, and no one can come across data by mistake because it's there automatically with algorithms. Someone can notice these algorithms and see patterns, but should they be blamed for noticing them, or should they be blamed for selling your data, selling the patterns that they see in the algorithms? That's what's interesting about this story. I don't see this story fading anytime soon, and if it stays in the media, this will be why. Because someone is selling other people's data to companies. As you can see, this story can also play a huge role in understanding the genetic makeup of human beings, because just like data, we are genetically coded by something in the universe. You can call it God. The interesting thing is you may notice patterns in your own life cycle if you pay close attention. But will the Creator sell our genetic data? Question. Story number 8, and the final story that made it into the media this week. The U.S. government and its Constitution, the center of attention. Everyone has a different agenda on the quest for power inside the United States. It's evident every day. But when it comes to the Constitution and the government, some analysts see the Constitution as the problem. A lot of people do not agree with the Constitution, but the majority believe in the power of the Constitution and believe that this is the greatest nation on earth. And although there are highlights in the Constitution that many vow to protect, what happens when there is opposition to documents that are the foundation of the most powerful nation in the world? The new war that's slowly gaining ground is who in government is doing their job when it comes to upholding the law of the land. In this power grab and in this power struggle, you may see some unusual things occurring in government and in the normal day-to-day activity of civilians. Each party is trying to see who's pulling their weight, and who's being responsible, and who understands their civic duty. One talking point that you may hear is that everybody dies in this emerging story. There's some poetry to that. When you hear that talking point, I recommend you keep an eye on your family and your tax dollars, because that usually means that somebody has not been pulling their weight in a country that is supposed to be unified and a country that promotes unity. Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Meteor this week with me, Brian West. And please don't forget to show us some support by subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can also go to our website if you want to show us some more support by sponsoring a program, buying something, watching something, clicking something, or just reading something. I want to thank you so much for tuning into the Meteor this week with me, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens.